We are constantly evolving. It's our job to set young people up for success. We can't say, hey guys, come on, join our team, and you can lease this project that might actually open for business in 5 years. And, yeah, by the way, you'll get paid then too, and expect them to actually sustain that lull of not generating income. I think there are so many things that frustrate me about commercial real estate brokerage. That's one of the hot buttons. And by the way, EXP has solved for a lot of the things like access to health insurance and other great things that a lot of us have had a tough time with through our careers. But let's stick with the consulting side of the business. If you get a team of professionals like us on this screen, and think that we're only going to be compensated as if and when you make those deals. To your point, Fred, when I'm telling clients all the time not to make the deal, that's our job.
Hey, it's a new world, gotta adapt to it. Innovation, information, more than the average. Rushing, please ignore the interruptions, cause this is digital discussions.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Digital Discussions. We have an amazing guest with us today, Fred Schmidt, the COO of RV3 Solutions. Fred, we're going to get into what that means exactly. Fred and I were connected as a result of EXP Commercial, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. You may recognize, if you're watching this on video, these two handsome gentlemen around me. If you don't, I'm going to give you the opportunity to meet them for the first time. And you may be hearing this only on audio. And I really highly suggest you go watch it on video, because Justin in particular is really, really handsome.
Stop that.
So why don't we start with you, handsome? Give us a little quick and dirty background on yourself, Justin.
Sure. So my name is Justin Korinis. I'm with Sabre Advisors. I run the New Jersey office for Sabre, but it includes sort of a big portion in New York Metro. We get involved in obviously business here locally, but obviously some national advisory work as well. And I guess that's my pitch.
That's good. Douglas Jerum, you're equally as handsome. I hope you didn't get offended by that.
I'm not easily offended. And Justin, you have to be watching on video, but Justin pulled the exact move to deprecate the comment you made by looking around over his shoulder that I was going to do. So, but fortunately, we didn't both do it at once. But yeah, humility runs deep, I guess, in the company. So, Douglas Jerum, I lead the National Advisory Group here at Sabre Advisors. Our National Advisory Group provides a full suite of advisory and real estate services to startup, emerging brands, and D2C retailers across the country.
Excellent. And Fred, again, equally as handsome. Hope you weren't offended. You in addition to RV3 Solutions, you're also joining the EXP Corporate Services Group. So why don't you give us a little background on you, because your background is vast. So give us a little background on you and why you're joining the EXP platform.
Sure. My background is 40 years in the commercial real estate services business, 16 as an agent. Have worked local, regional, national, and global in terms of operations and running real estate offices, and have also been involved in a ton of multi-market work and what we call corporate services, occupier use, and that's been where my focus is. Left the corporate world about 3 years ago, and we formed RV3 Solutions, which stands for Real Value, and that's in the commercial real estate continuum: strategic, operational, and economic values on behalf of the client. So it's those three key elements, and as you all know, there's a lot of different services that are reflected in there. EXP. Jim Wong, who's the CEO and COO, I knew from the Asian American Real Estate Association. I was an advisor to him, and he asked me to come on his advisory board. I looked under the hood of what EXP was all about, and I think that we'll probably get into this a little. when you go through an existential crisis like we went through over the last year with COVID, everything changes. And I think business models are changing. I have a consulting business that consults commercial real estate services firms, independently owned and operated. And so you have the demographic change that our industry is going through, and then you go through a change such as this. And when I looked at the EXP under the hood, and I worked at Realogy for a bunch of years, which is a very large residential company also. I ran the commercial operations. And the reason I'm bringing that up is the residential folks tend to be about 5 to 10 years ahead of our industry in terms of a technology adoption. And so the EXP flat fee cloud-based model, I think, is a thing of the future. And I'm looking, I ran a network. I mean, no disrespect to the current networks that are out there, but there's a degree of functional and economic obsolescence in that model right now. Anyway, I've said a mouthful, but that's kind of the element.
No, and you did, but you really answered, I think, a lot of questions that folks have about, listen, Doug and I were having a conversation yesterday, just along the lines of what you said. And then when you went into it's funny, you mentioned that residential is 5 to 10 years ahead. I would say it's 25, years ahead from a tech and social media, standpoint. So, I'd love to get Doug and Justin, kind of your thoughts on what Fred just said.
Yeah, I mean, I laughed when you said that, Fred, that anybody that just wants to figure out what to do next in commercial real estate, I'll just tell them to go look at what somebody's doing in residential real estate with a completely straight face. I mean, that will show you exactly the technology that will, that most people in commercial real estate will start fooling around with in 5 to 10 years, or as Jay said, maybe in 25. But yeah, you could not be more on the money with that.
Justin?
Yeah, it's funny too. I mean, when Fred said that just now, I kind of giggled because we've had that, exact conversation however many times. And, it's funny, and especially in Fred's background being in corporate services, and I did that for a while as well with the previous firm. I mean, there's the amount of technology that you're potentially bringing to the table to service your client is tremendous, but the amount of technology that you're using as an individual for yourself to generate leads, to promote your brand, to do all those things, it's like we're stuck in the dark ages. As the individual or as the company itself promoting itself, it's 20 years behind. But in terms of the kind of stuff that we are utilizing to give results to our clients, it's next level and it's tremendous. So there's this huge disconnect between the technology that we're implementing to do our jobs well and the technology that we're implementing to be better at, for instance, getting new business or getting ourselves out there, or just, I don't know, even simple things like DocuSigns and that kind of stuff that we're just starting to adopt in the commercial industry that have been around in the residential for, I don't know, 10 years.
Yeah, at least. So it's interesting because Fred, a lot of people that solely focus in commercial real estate really frown upon, residential. They make it seem like, commercial is such a more sophisticated business, and they kind of like puff their chests up that they're in commercial. And I'm also, guilty of that on some level. So when EXP was, knocking on our door initially, when I started to get under the hood and learn about the company, my first reaction was, well, this is a residential company, kind of like Keller Williams or these other companies that are more residential and then have a corporate division. That typically, the minute that I see that, I'm not interested. Once I started to peel back the onion and really learn more about EXP and what it's about and what Glenn created and the team at EXP and the timing of EXP and to your point, the cloud-based technology that they essentially own with Verbella and all of the other stuff, I was like, wow, this might be a residential company that actually, transitions really effectively into the commercial business. And I think by us jumping on and being a part of that in the early stages, I think it's going to happen. So, Fred, what are your thoughts on those, more kind of well-known companies that are residential and I guess resi-mercial, and what EXP is offering?
Yeah, probably more than, and I don't mean this in a braggadocio way. And by the way, Justin's comment about the digital pathways, I want to come back to that in a second, but the resi-mercial is something I'm totally against. So in other words, I'll say that in other words, you want to have pure play commercial. You guys know the secret to success in any business and in life is focus, right? Being totally focused, knowing your market, knowing your niche, and then working out to the market versus trying to do it all. And I think that's if residential gets a bad name, as a lot of folks think they can do it all. It's an easy entry level business, but I have also found that it's like any business. If you go to the top 20 or 30%, the agents there, and sell them on the services of what commercial does and how you can make money with each other, that's worked very well, and it's been very good for us and everything. But I think having pure play commercial people in the EXP vertical is clear, is key, and a key thing to doing that. Having said that, are there people that want to transition over and everything? Yes. I think it's a very hard road to try to do both. I've never seen people be really successful. Now, if you set up a team where you have a residential team and a commercial team, that can work, and things like that. But it's the business model needs to be total focus with regard to that.
I love that you called out the pure play commercial, because listen, at Sabre, we have no interest in,
and neither do I.
Yeah, no, I know. And that's why we hit it off in our discussion. And I think a lot of folks don't really understand that you can be pure play commercial and operate your business on the EXP platform the same way you're operating your business now. And I think that's something that, made us really comfortable to actually give that a shot, because ultimately, if we were going to be surrounded by, folks that don't necessarily play at a high level in the commercial arena, that's going to tarnish our brand. A lot of, people that are initially asking why we joined the platform, I think are confused and think that we're possibly getting in that resi-mercial space. So I'm glad that you clarified that.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. And going forward, that's something, Mark. Look, I went through it before, being in Realogy, as Coldwell Banker commercial and everything, where your competition will label you that way. So you have to, you hit it right up front. Oh no, this is all I do and everything I do. So because they'll try to
competition, by the way, I don't
know. So they'll try to people will label you in that regard and everything else. But I think, because we've gone through so much change over the last year, the playing field is the dynamic, I think, is going to be a lot different going forward. So,
something I think that people in our business have that cringe when you talk about residential companies, and there's some justification for that, but I think what people miss is that the things that residential real estate firms are doing, they are all based on doing things at scale and at volume. And I think that's the reason why folks in commercial keep getting it wrong, is that they're not looking beyond their opinion of the practitioners to the business that they're conducting, and they are all about conducting volume of transactions and doing it super efficiently, because most people, they average $60,000 to $100,000 in gross commissions a year. And so, and even EXP is the really the ultimate expression of that. They've built a platform to move from even a percentage just to be fee based and to execute transactions at the absolute lowest price possible. So that's why you look to them for learning about what the best practices on technology for real estate are.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of things that we can learn from the residential side of the business, which is, again, very different. But you have to give credit where credit's due for the marketing and branding. I mean, Justin should be on the grocery carts at the local grocery store, and I think if he could add in commercial a glamour shots headshot to his business card and not be completely made fun of, he would do it. Am I right or wrong, Justin?
I was always thinking like the bus stop bench more so than the business card.
Modern family, let's go.
No, but I would say in all seriousness, you guys, Sabre, and your focus is mostly on retail, right? In that is that you have more than like the office specialist or the industrial or multifamily, even, you have a window into the consumer mind through your client. Okay. And the pathways, the digital pathways, or the omni-channel approach, which you guys have heard a million times, to how the consumer is being interfaced with. And that is analogous to the residential side of the business because they're consumer interfacing, to your points.
Yes.
So the retail brokerage, out of all the, and you and I talked about this, Jayson, out of all the specialties in the industry, I think require the most sophistication. I geared up a lot of salespeople in my career and have trained them and been, you and I have this in common, very focused on getting a return on your people and investing in them, because that's the best in their minds and helping them to be successful. And that's one of the reasons I joined EXP too, is to help mentor people and move them along in their pathways. But that digital pathway, a retail broker more than any other, I can move a retail broker over to office and industrial or anything, and they could do it in their sleep because it requires so much more levels of sophistication.
That's, by the way, very nice to hear, because we're typically so in our lane that we don't really pay attention to that much. But I think you're spot on. I think there's a lot, in order to be able to advise a company at the highest level and essentially become an extension of that company, right? And deal with the founders of the company and the C-suite and the decision makers, create the strategy with them as if you are part of the company, and then execute that strategy is something very different. And when, we're doing it nationally, in some cases internationally. So, there's a very different skill set that comes along with that. And I think, Doug, maybe you could just talk about that from a macro perspective, because I don't think a lot of people, we have a lot of, when it to all kidding aside on the personal branding thing that I mentioned about, residential photos on the business cards and on the shopping carts and the bus station, I'm saying that in stride, while I really give the residential folks credit for putting themselves out there and generating leads in a very, very creative way, a lot more creative than the rest of us for the most part in the commercial space. But Doug, talk a little bit about just, what we do as advisors to founders and, C-suite for companies that are looking to scale.
So, what you have to do to be differentiated now, in our business is, we talk about, value add, and, just doing the transaction. There's not much value add there. There's plenty of people that can do a transaction, and there's plenty of people who are good at negotiating, or at least competent at negotiating. There's no value add there. That's the mechanics, or that's the table stakes of servicing a client. And particularly if you want to have the opportunity to work either multi markets or to manage or run a program for somebody, you have to be able to deliver or possess the skills to deliver on the tasks that they would normally in the past have had somebody in-house to do. So you need to be able to or learn how to develop a strategic plan to figure out how to enter a market, figure out what your strategy is going to be for multiple markets over a long period of time, and how to manage other outside partners, so the engineers and architects and attorneys and things like that. So in its simplest form, think about what an inside real estate person does. You need to have people or teams of people available that can provide those same services. And the clients have different amounts of those that they need. They won't all need the entire basket of of services, but you need to have people that can address those, because that's where the value add is. That's why they're going to work with you over somebody else, because you're going to bring those services to their program.
It's well put. I call that being the conductor of the symphony. if you will,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Where you're integrating all the different services, whether it's in-house with the client or outsourced or a combination of both, and how do you bring them all together and you integrate all them in terms of one consistent service delivery platform, and that's in a given market, and then you do multiple markets. It becomes pretty complicated, but it's also a lot of fun. I also found
Yeah.
what really it inspires me or motivates me with multi-market work like this too is, and you hit on it, Doug, was you have the strategy of the client, and then you see the implementation. The real estate's the manifestation of the strategy, right? So at the end of the day, here's what what corporate said or headquarters, and here's what they're doing in the field, and what's the manifestation of that strategy, and how's it work? And I've always found that endlessly stimulating and intriguing. So
It's totally fascinating. It's, were it not for doing that work, I wouldn't be in the business any longer. I just, just churning out transactions is not something that I want to do as the focus of my day. I'm doing this because, I get to play a role, not just one retailer, but at a bunch of them at a strategic level. And that leads me to actually another part of the skill set, and I would encourage people who are interested in doing more for their clients is find ways to get yourself educated on how operations work, how supply chain works, how finance works. You don't have to become a CFO, you don't have to have that depth of knowledge, but don't be ignorant of it either. Have an understanding of how it all works, because then you can have, when you get to a position where you're not just talking to other real estate people, and that's implicit in what this work we're doing, it's mostly smaller companies, and the fact that we're there is largely because there's not real estate people, or if there is, there's one, and you're still interfacing with the rest of the team. You need to know how to communicate in a way that you can build consensus, or just tell the story of what you're trying to do in a way that everybody else is going to understand, and deliver things in a well-rounded perspective, not just from a real estate point of view, but real estate as it relates to operations, real estate as it relates to finance, all of those. And that's where you really become valuable to them, because you're creating this bridge between all the different disciplines that you need to have a successful retail concept.
I think a lot of what we're describing right now is why we call ourselves advisors, and we frown upon the word broker. Justin, we're talking a lot about the tenant side of the business. You obviously are active on both sides, but I think a good example of this on the property or project development side is Bellworks. Can you talk a little bit about what we do and how it translates to a property?
Yeah. And before we touch on that, I just wanted to add one thing too, and kind of going back to when I got into the business and the corporate services side. I think the first example that I really saw of people bringing the advisory side of the business separate from brokerage, at the time, and I'll even use names because these are some of my good friends now, but at the time when I'd come into the business, I started on the industrial side, and almost within a month of the same time I started, we had acquired a team of supply chain and logistics consultants who came in and helped spearhead what was at the time kind of the corporate services business for a number of sort of larger Fortune 500 companies specializing in consumer goods and manufacturing and that kind of thing. And being able to walk into a C-suite meeting with a bunch of people and sit there and say, look, we've spent however much time analyzing what you're doing. Here's how we think it can be improved in terms of efficiency. You need larger distribution centers, more centrally located, or we need to go the other direction. They need to be more regionally placed, whatever it was. And also, by the way, getting paid separately for that evaluation and that advice. And being able to do that in that way kind of opened my eyes up to sort of the possibilities. And then, once I transitioned onto the retail side, being able to essentially do the same thing for similar, companies and doing similar type evaluations, but understanding or getting in the head of kind of what their core customer is and what's really driving their business and their valuations. To talk about something like Bellworks a little bit, I mean, we've spent the last couple of years really working on a number of larger mixed-use development projects, certainly in the New York Metro, and then that's now expanding outside of here as well. We're just gearing up. Bellwork Chicago just opened, and we're in the process of handling that as well. But a lot of what me and my team do is really focus on a lot of things that go beyond just, hey, we're going to call a tenant and see if they want to fill the space. A lot of it has to do with being very mindful about merchandising, the lease plan, the types of tenants that we're going after, understanding, what the landlord's really trying to achieve, which in these cases is more than just, the greatest ROI. There's an ROI that exists beyond just whatever the net rent brings in. So in those cases, they have these large mixed-use developments. The office rents are primarily driving the economics of the project, but ownership is really focused on creating a one-of-a-kind, destination asset. And in order to do that, we need to have some of the most unique and cool retail that there is. And a lot of that's kind of diving into these markets and grabbing, unique local character tenants and mixing them with some larger nationals, having all different types of uses, from medical to fitness to boutique shopping to some of the best F&B options that are out there. And it's not an easy lift, because a lot of the tenants that we're dealing with are mom and pops. They're not, real estate professionals. It's very different. I use an example, like, Sabre does a lot of work with Starbucks. It's something that, Jay and Russell primarily cut their teeth on. And those are professional real estate folks. I mean, like, doing deals and leasing transactions is what they do all day long. So when you're talking with them, or when you're talking with the landlords, I mean, you're dealing with a lot of people who spend their entire life handling these kinds of things. When you're trying to bring a mom and pop tenant into a 2 million square foot, project, it starts getting way more complicated, because this might be the second, maybe third transaction that they've ever done in their life. There's a lot of folks who come in and, what's up, buddy? There's a lot of folks who come in and, it's a startup and they've never done a real estate transaction before. And the amount of hand-holding that goes into it, even on the landlord side, just hand-holding them to kind of get them ready or understand where they are to see if they're ready for something like that, is tremendous.
Fred, I know that, when Justin mentioned he had a background in industrial, it's funny how relevant that is in retail today, right? Obviously with, as you mentioned, omni-channel. I think that we talked a little bit about, obviously the impact of COVID, and it begs the question, what do you see, since you have a lens into the different sides of the commercial real estate business? What do you see happening? What was happening kind of pre-pandemic and then got accelerated as a result of it?
Sure. Well, the retail sector, and this is no big surprise. We knew there was some degree of functional and economic obsolescence on B and C malls across the United States. And that just, what was a 7-year slow burn, I think has been accelerated into it's still a slow moving, I don't want to say train wreck. That's too, well, maybe it is. It's like for those malls, but it's compressed that. And I think, unfortunately and tragically, for a lot of, Justin was talking, a lot of small businesses around the country and folks who just have been impacted. And I don't know, we're not going to see a lot of them come out of that, but there was, we were at about a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio of square footage to consumers in the United States. We're about 2.5 to 3 times ahead of the rest of the world. I in my prior job, I couldn't say that publicly because I was but we could say that now. It's like we were overstored, in a lot of area. And so we still are. And I think that's still playing itself out. Change is opportunity in our business. And as you guys well know, whether it's good or bad, unfortunately, and I don't mean this at the expense of anyone who's suffering through this, but there's going to be tremendous changes, and we still don't know where it's. You have to to your earlier points, I think Doug was just bringing up, really need to be a student of the business right now on what's happening out there, what's going on with folks, because there's changes coming. I just don't know if anybody tells you they know exactly what's going to happen in retail and how consumers are behaving. They don't know yet. I have a sense there's going to be a bit of a renaissance going in, like there's going to be a flurry Because everybody wants to get out. I can tell in the towns where I live and everything, and everybody's out and about and everything else. So you're going to see that. I can see a lot of small businesses starting again because the rents have gotten lower, the cost to break even. So all those dynamics are happening there. I don't know how much distress is going to occur. Certainly New York. You guys are right on the epicenter of that. Like where office, what I just heard the other day, office is still at 25 to 30% occupancy, and that correlates with retail foot traffic. Right. And then tourists coming back to the city. So all those different things play into it. It's a wide mosaic and everything, but there's definitely market driven change occurring in the sector and buying behaviors. And I think my generation, I'm talking I'm a boomer, obviously, our buying habits, I think probably because there's a lot of wealth in this generation, probably the largest concentration of wealth in the history of mankind is in the baby boomers right now. And that transfer of that wealth is starting to occur to our kids. Maybe you guys are some of the beneficiaries of that, but anyway, so in that regard, but our buying habits in the way,
I wish.
But everything we've talked about, experiential real estate, all those different things, I think are going to be, people are going to want experiences more than ever than just buying stuff, so that has to still play out. But that omni-channel approach, last mile distribution, I know like the high-end restaurants around where I live and everything else, ordering takeout now, which they never did. Like all those things are permanent changes. Okay. Hybrid work models. So there's a lot of different impacts that are playing themselves out. And how does that manifest in real estate remains to be seen. I know that's not an answer to you, but if I try to give you an answer, you have to see how your clients will lead the way with that, by the way. So.
Yeah, no, I think you shed some light on it for sure. And I think everything you said, I agree with. We had
I'd like to say, Jay, that it's sort of like the toothpaste is out of the tube. I love using that expression. And I think that's so much the case with so many of these changes that happened during the pandemic. Once these changes are made and they're adopted, they're very difficult to reverse. They're very sticky kind of things. So the higher end restaurants doing takeout or, outdoor dining just in general, and how much in the Northeast, for instance, that was always such a challenge. And now it's almost ubiquitous and it's something that we really want moving forward. So, so many of these things are, I think, for the better. And I hope they don't go away. And I think it's going to take a really long time to reverse some of those trends. So I think you're absolutely right about that. Where we end up 5 years from now, I think it's harder to predict, but I think the next 2 or 3 years are a little bit easier to kind of see. And I'm also hearing a lot about quote unquote revenge spending. So people spending more on luxury goods, trips, all these things that, when we were pent up in your homes for the most part for a long period of time, you weren't doing. Now it's like people are just, they have some money sitting in the bank and they're taking advantage of it. And certainly on the travel side, I'm seeing that blow up. I mean, the price of flights lately is insane.
Absolutely. And Justin, you touched on something earlier that I want to come back to in terms of our industry, and that is the advisory and consulting side. I have a consulting business that I've been doing. And so we as typical brokers and agents, we're not comfortable or used to charging for our services on a consultative side. And I think that's a big change that's coming with clients are going to look more. They may not be transactional right at this moment in retail or office because they just don't know. And indecision is death for our business, right? So that's one of the things. But if you can set up a consultant, and that's one of the things I think I'll do with EAXP is show folks, hey, here's how you can set up a consulting practice. Here's how you can price yourself. Here's the different models. And clients are comfortable in it's getting ourselves over the fact that we have to charge them and bill them and do all those things. But they're looking for that right now in a very big way. So.
Well, how many clients have you ever dealt with on, especially for instance, on the tenant rep side, and they might be kind of new to this. They haven't really dealt with someone of our caliber before. And one of their first questions is, well, how do you get paid or how do we pay you? And I think we're so quick to say, no, it's okay. The landlord pays us, right? But that's a broken model from, eras past. Doesn't really work as well on the tenant rep side. So understanding that there are definitely times that the landlord's going to pay us, or understanding that there's going to be times that, there are other services that we're offering that kind of go beyond that, and being able to kind of navigate the difference or go between them.
Sure. So like Doug was talking about earlier, where we have multi-market clients, where client says, and you guys have heard this, I want to open up 50 locations in the United States over the next year or next 2 years. And here's my cost benefit ratio of what it's going to take for me to serve that account. And there's transaction fees, and you can do the math on it, pretty simple. Like, okay, here's the average lease term, here's the average rent, and here's the fees. But I may tell you only to take 30 locations versus 50. And I could save you $20 million or whatever it is. And so there's a savings that's in there that, I'm going to tell you not to do a deal as much as doing a deal. And the consulting gives the client comfort that you're telling them, hey, you shouldn't go forward with this for these reasons. So that's part of the objectivity that I think you can offset it with commissions, but there's a way to pitch that and to win that business. And the client will feel comfortable in that regard too. I mean, we could spend a whole hour on that discussion alone, by the way. So
yeah, but it's an amazing discussion that is not had frequently. Again, on the brokerage side of the business. Now, Sabre, we operate as brokers as well as advisors and consultants, so it's not foreign to us by any means. And Doug, you have some background on that, so I think I think it's really interesting because with the shift of everything, we know it's very important for us to spend our time really, really wisely. And we spend a lot of our time training younger people with less experience not to chase the wrong horse for way too long, where they're essentially out of business. And we've had to change our model, even through the pandemic, to make sure that, when we are diving into projects that, whether it's a development project that is 3 years out and needs to go through a zoning and, that entitlement process. And that's great that we have, a big sheet of paper with lines on it that we could point to and say, this space is available, but when you drive past it, it's an old Sears, right? And if we ever actually make a deal on it and they move forward with the project, we're not getting paid for a solid 3, 4, 5 years, which is the wonderful job of a broker, right? So we are constantly evolving. And I want to just touch on this before Doug chimes in here. It's our job to set young people up for success. We can't say, hey guys, come on, join our team, and you can lease this project that might actually open for business in 5 years. And, by the way, you'll get paid then too, and expect them to actually sustain that lull of not generating income. I think there are so many things that frustrate me about commercial real estate brokerage. That's one of the hot buttons. And by the way, EXP has solved for a lot of the things like access to health insurance and, other great things that, a lot of us have had a tough time with through our careers. But let's stick with the consulting, side of the business. If you get a team of professionals like us on this screen, and think that we're only going to be compensated as if and when you make those deals, to your point, Fred, when I'm telling clients all the time not to make the deal, that's our job. Doug.
Yeah, you have to start charging. We still make the majority of our revenue is from brokerage fees, for sure. But an ever growing part is coming from advisory and other value add services, because it has to. The way I started doing this, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years ago. Before I joined Sabre, and I've owned my own company for 25 years. I had a brokerage company doing, was calling it outsourced real estate services, but same thing, national advisory. And in setting that up, one of the things that I went into that with is, we're like the only industry that, does everything on a handshake. You only get paid when the deal closes, and you put in a whole bunch of work up front, maybe to get a deal done, maybe not. But you're delivering a bunch of value that's portable. Your client can take what you've done and, say thanks and move on, and you're not compensated. Like, there's nobody else out there that would do that. It's dumb. And so, I looked at that and said, if I'm confident that I'm truly delivering high value services, then, there should be people that are willing to pay for it. This, one of the secrets was, and we're big about, we'll tell you, we'll share all the secrets, knowing isn't doing. And so, we'll tell you whatever you want to know. One of the secrets is that generally works much better with, smaller, newer retailers, folks that are not coming into the industry, having been in it for 20 years. You're not going to go to a 400 store retailer, and start charging them for doing a market plan for your market. But retailers that are newer to the business are used to having contracts and paying for services and compensating people for work, and so with that mindset started structuring deals or assignments to be reflective of that. The fees are very modest. They're, like I said, they're not the majority of the fees that we generate, but they are meaningful, and what they do is they allow us to do our best work and to provide the attention and the care to the clients that they deserve, and we deserve to be paid for it. So they get better service. They're not falling victim to the broker who's gonna make a great pitch, get you on board, and then you can't get them on the phone all that often after that. That doesn't happen because there's economic consideration being paid for that time.
No, and
I think you touched on something, Doug, though, that I think is important to expand on. The reason that 400 unit operator isn't necessarily a good fit is because they generally have somewhere between probably 3 and 5 people in a real estate department that they're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for, that are doing the same job that we would be doing. It just becomes redundant. The reason it works better with that smaller retailer, obviously, is they have a smaller team of executives. They don't have those kinds of resources from a personnel perspective, nor that guaranteed salary that they're willing to pay every year on all of those people. So there's that weird niche where those groups are looking to do significant deals per year, and they don't really have that time commitment. They can't make that time investment in that team of people, the amount of time it takes just to hire and get that all brought up to speed. And I kind of look at it as, so much of things in my life come back to sports analogies, but when you're, sitting and you're trying to figure out, you're an NFL football team, for instance, and you're sitting and trying to figure out what your strategy for next year is going to be. You've got a pretty good high, pick in the draft, and you can try to draft a quarterback, bring them in, work a system around them, give them a couple years to ramp up. And then ultimately that would probably be the best thing for your organization if it works and if everything goes well. The alternative being you can go out and get the free agent, veteran who's very good and is a fit for what you guys are already doing, or can work around the system that you would like to implement for your other personnel. And in my mind, that's us, right? We're that veteran quarterback who can come in day one and add value versus the guy you need to build around and create a team long term.
And putting a value on your service. And I think that's where our industry falls short, is because of the commissions and the fee-based things, is like, here's what it would cost you, Mr. or Mrs. Client, if you hired this yourself or did it yourself, and here's the value, and then the cost benefit ratio, the savings you're going to have, and measuring all that. That's the competitive differentiator and the opportunity that exists, and everything that's out there. And the listing side is the exact same, by the way. And the Bell Works, I'm good friends. I know Jeff Garibaldi very well, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
he lives in I've known Garibaldi since I was born.
I forgot the Summit connection. Yeah.
Well, also from the business and everything. I know his whole family, and our grandfathers knew each other. It's a whole on my Italian side. But anyway, but the Bell Works is a good example, as you know. It's a very unique, some of the most unique architecture and home dell in the world. Same with Chicago, and that was there's a marketing fee that was being paid to service that, because it was a 2 to 3 year lease up period to get that project going, and it was well invested. And I think the client would say, oh yeah, this was money well spent to do that, and it's proven by the success of that overall. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Well, guys, we're coming up here on the hour, so I want to go around the room here and just ask you guys to chime in on, some final thoughts on, maybe some things you're excited about where we are today in general and moving forward, and maybe a few things that that you're not necessarily so excited about. Some pros and cons or predictions on what's going to happen from here on out in the commercial real estate space. So, Fred, why don't we just start with you? Feel free to say anything you want to say.
Oh my goodness. Well, I've always believed in this, and I've done well, made money off of this and everything, is that change is opportunity in our business, whether it's good or bad. And I mean, when I say bad, I don't mean at the expense of someone's demise, but let's face it, that goes on. 2008, my group made more money during that 3-year period than we profitability wise, because of the changes, the REOs and everything that was going on there. So we're going through a change right now that we don't know the ramifications of it, but it's occurring. So there will be lots of opportunities out there, but you really have to have your head on right now. The digitalization, we didn't talk much about this, but the digitalization of everything is occurring at warp speed right now. And so that's something in our industry we need to pay attention to. And if we don't do it, somebody else will. So
well said. Well said. Doug.
I think I'll go a little more macro. There will be I think we're starting at the beginning of the end of free two-way shipping for all but the largest retailers. It's going to be a painful walk backwards, but it has to happen. Like, the numbers say it's unsustainable where we've gotten to. So be interested to see how that happens, but it will happen. And again, won't be for Walmart, won't be for Amazon, it won't be those who have enough scale, but everybody else has to walk it back. And so that'll be interesting as people start to have to pay for shipping. Yeah, I'll leave it there with that one. That's a pretty big one.
That is a big one. That's very interesting. Justin.
I now I feel like I need to go a different direction, but I was just going to say, I think within our industry, the specialization is just going to continue to grow. And that's not necessarily, someone focusing on such a microscopic aspect of what they're doing. But I think, over the last couple of years, we've seen a divergence in kind of the folks handling different commercial assets, especially in the larger marketplaces. I think there's been a huge separation. We talked earlier about the resi-mercial. I think there's been a large separation from the residential to the commercial. I think we're just going to see more and more of that kind of specialization. And look, I think on the commercial end right now, there's a lot of folks who have spent the last year, they've either left the business or they've been struggling because market share has sort of decreased. We've seen a lot of the kind of senior people in offices starting taking on smaller and smaller requirements just to keep, the money flowing in. I think as that happens, the brain power, the executive level delivery needs to continue to grow, and you're going to see that kind of separate from the rest of the pack. And I think some of that's with technology as well. Those that are ready, willing, and able to adapt and adopt new technologies are going to grow light speed ahead of those that aren't. We've talked about for so long being active in social media and the benefits that that's had for Sabre and for us as individuals and for the brand. How many people all of a sudden in the last year are trying to play catch up in a time where, you can no longer network in person, or we're not able to for a long period of time. And now they're trying to get their face out there, and it's impossible to kind of start from scratch. So not impossible, difficult to start from scratch. So I think we're just going to see kind of that separation from the pack, I guess, is just the best way to put it overall.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys for joining us today. I think the common theme here amongst us is there's a lot of opportunity. Change for people who understand what's happening and maybe can see a little bit around the corner is an amazing thing. I'm at this 20 years now, and I could not be more excited about where we are today as a whole. We've barely scratched the surface with EXP Commercial. I think that is going to be a really, really interesting thing for all of us. It's why Fred and I, connected. And I think hearing his perspective and background and understanding of, how change can really be a positive thing for all of us. And, we share a lot of the same thoughts on what can happen and what could make the industry better overall. I want to close out by saying, again, one of the things that I've always disliked about commercial real estate is, it's always attracted a very specific type of person that looks a certain way, acts a certain way. And I think that we're all doing our part to actually not only help the people that are having a challenging time get through a downturn or a pandemic, but at the same time, I think the things that we're all doing collectively are going to attract exciting new people into the industry. And that's the most exciting thing that I think Sabre and EXP are able to do by moving differently and just innovating in our industry as a whole.
Great stuff. And Jayson, your team, had the Power Women in Real Estate. I listened in on that panel yesterday. The Sabre team was just phenomenal. The women that you had there, really, really good. So you're living it and doing it. To you guys, to your credit. So
thank you so much, Fred. Means the world. And we have to obviously carry on this conversation offline. Super happy that you got to meet Doug and Justin, and we should get together as well in the near future.
Pleasure, guys. Thank you so much. So
thanks, everybody.
See you in the
Thanks,
world.
Fred. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Take care.
'Cause this is digital discussions.